They were undisciplined as soldiers.
We say that there was an army. There wasn't an army. There was a gaggle. These men are ragged. It was a mess.
Up against the world's strongest empire.
The British are certain they can swat these militia away like pesky flies.
Americans lost battle after battle.
The British make the assumption that a simple show of force will be enough to scare rebels back to their senses.
The question Britain's asking is, why isn't this thing over yet? This should have been an easy victory.
Massachusetts has never seen a mob as violent as this. They're not just angry about the money. They're angry at the assault on their autonomy by English rulers who neither know them nor represent them. The revolt spreads like an epidemic through all 13 colonies. It's hard to imagine that the fallout from this tax will ignite a social revolution unlike any the world has ever seen. Across the Atlantic, England's King George III is losing his patience. His colonies are acting like petulant children. These are his subjects, Englishmen, born in America, but Englishmen just the same. He is their ruler, and it's because of them that his empire is going broke. A decade ago, he sent British troops across the ocean to defend the colonies against French settlers and their Indian allies. The war went on for 7 years, and it cost England £60 million, money it now desperately needs.
There's a sense that after the 7 Years' War, that America ought to pay its way a little bit. That expenses to protect North America should in part be raised in North America.
Parliament's solution is unprecedented. The Stamp Act of 1765 directly taxes colonies by having them pay for stamps that must be affixed to virtually every piece of paper they touch, from official documents to playing cards. It is the first time ever that Parliament has levied a tax on the American colonies. It goes badly from the start. The colonists resent not only paying the tax, but also having it imposed by a faraway parliament where no one represents them. Though the Crown appoints colonial governors and high officials, each colony is long accustomed to ruling itself and levying its own taxes.
The Americans believed that over 150 years of being colonists, they had in a sense created a nation within the British Empire. They had free assemblies, democratically elected. They had free and independent and very good newspapers. They had their own tax system.
It wasn't just paying a little bit of money. The notion was that other people were making them pay money. So it's an emotional issue. Who's in control here? We want to control our own lives, which includes, of course, our own pocketbooks.
In 1765, a new generation of colonists is rushing headlong down an uncharted path to an unknown end, and the Stamp Act is what starts it.
Much of the spirit, if not the exact words, is, don't you see what they're up to? Don't you see what's going on? There's a strategy at work here to gradually erode American liberties. If you let them do this, what will they try to do next?
For the British, the tax isn't about eroding liberties, it's about money. Stoking the colonial reaction is a powerful underground movement known as the Sons of Liberty. They meet secretly in taverns across the colonies and come up with every tactic they can to keep government officials from collecting England's tax. The tax crisis has become just too big a headache, and in March 1766, a beleaguered Parliament finally repeals the Stamp Act. Unbelievably, the people of the colonies have forced the world's greatest power to back down. The rebel colonists can celebrate their first sweet taste of victory and of power. But the battles are far from over. England still needs the money and still needs to show who's boss. Over the next 4 years, Parliament devises new taxes, which trigger renewed upheaval and end up being repealed. As this seemingly endless cycle continues, England dispatches 2 military regiments to Massachusetts from New York to keep order, adding fuel to the fire. In 1768, 4 more regiments sailed from England on a collision course with America. Boston, 1770. 1,000 British troops occupy this city of 15,000. It is a volatile brew. Boston is an accident waiting to happen, literally.
Conditions are ripe. We've got an indigenous population that is very, very sensitive to having British soldiers quartered amongst them. You have all of these British regiments in Boston. This is something that the Bostonians simply chafe under.
Resentment grows against the soldiers in Boston's streets. On the night of March 5th, a band of local patriots heckles a British sentry standing guard at the customs house. At first, they merely hurl insults, but soon they're hurling snowballs, and 8 more soldiers come to the aid of their comrade.
You have a group of men who are egging on British soldiers, looking for ways to kind of stir up a fight, and now they've created the antagonism that they've been trying to gin up.
Hundreds more colonists pour into the street. They launch a barrage of ice, oyster shells, and rocks at the soldiers. The guards panic. Their guns go off. And when it's over, 5 civilians lay dead on the frozen street. Within hours of the deadly shootings, the Patriot spin machine roars into high gear. A tragic accident is recast as a murderous crime against the colonial people in what becomes known as the Boston Massacre. Back in England, the colonial rebellion becomes a national preoccupation. Over the next 3 years, Parliament keeps trying to impose its authority with new laws and new taxes. As each new law inflames the rebellion, it ends up getting repealed. Except for one, a tax on tea. It's all that militant patriots need to strike another blow against the empire. Feathers and coal dust are their weapons. On December 16th, 1773, the Sons of Liberty enlist 50 men to darken their faces, stick feathers in their hair, and arm themselves with hatchets in a bad impersonation of Mohawk Indians. 5,000 people follow them down to Boston Harbor and watch as they climb aboard a merchant ship loaded with tea from England. With British soldiers absent since the Boston Massacre, there is no one to stop them. 342 crates of tea worth 10,000 British pounds are cast overboard. This wanton act of sabotage, which becomes known as the Boston Tea Party, will soon push the two sides to the brink of war.
The British reaction was disgust and outrage.
Now, in London in January 1774, Benjamin Franklin is summoned to appear before the King's Council.
Franklin is dressed down by the Solicitor General of England for a full hour in the strongest possible language. I mean, it's really abusive language. In front of a crowd, is going wild at this venomous attack. And Franklin stands stock still in this humiliating moment, head erect, and doesn't say a word for an hour. Many people have dated that as the moment at which Franklin becomes a revolutionary.
Franklin the revolutionary is done with England, and England is done with him. Parliament punishes Massachusetts with a vengeance. It revokes the colony's 80-year-old charter, dissolves its local assemblies, and after a 4-year absence, sends 3,000 troops to reoccupy Boston. The Crown now runs Massachusetts.
These people had been meeting in town meetings for 150 years. When they can no longer decide their own fate, they said, "This is the end." People throughout Massachusetts rose up as one and said, "No way."
There is no turning back for either side. The tension between the people of Massachusetts and the British troops becomes unbearable. It's only a matter of time before someone fires the shot that will echo around the world. In April 1775, Gage gets orders from England to break the uneasy stalemate. He will send a full force out to the countryside to seize a huge store of rebel ammunition. Unknown to Gage, Parliament, King George, or anyone else, the fate of the British Empire hangs on this decision.
Once Gage sends that mission out, he really has set into motion a chain of events that is beyond his ability to control.
The British are indeed coming.
The news starts leaking out, and people start mobilizing. They're ready.
Out into the countryside to spread the word goes Paul Revere, whose engraving of the Boston Massacre fanned the flames of outrage 5 years earlier. Poems and school books will one day mythologize Revere's midnight ride as if he were the lone heroic messenger. But in fact, he is just one part of a whole system of communication.
Paul Revere is one of dozens, then scores, and literally hundreds of messengers going every which way. Bells are ringing, the shots are being fired. So before dawn, hours before dawn, the whole countryside is mobilized and knows what's happening.
4:30 a.m. Drums announce that the British are on their way.
I'm sure the mood on Lexington Green was extremely tense. The best trained, most professional army in the world is bearing down on them. So even though they were fired up with a great sense of injustice, they were probably nervous. And if they weren't, they should have been.
That's it. Okay. Step back, lads. Step back.
Both sides eye each other suspiciously, both sides not wanting to take a misstep. All of a sudden, a single shot is fired. Nobody knows who fired the shot. After the war and investigations, nobody ever found out. As soon as that shot was fired, both sides commenced firing at will, and the American Revolution was on.
Comrades! Fire! Fire! Ready! Quickly! Treason! Fire!
In less than 2 minutes, 8 militiamen lay dead, 10 wounded.